Welcome to Architecting IAM Resilience, a blueprint for reducing identity risk. I'm Brendon Rod, our Chief Evangelist. Joining me is Muli Motola, our co-founder and CEO at Acsense. We'll bring him on stage in a few slides once I cover the introduction. So what we're going to explore today is why identity now sits at the heart of business continuity and how IAM Resilience is a strategic asset. We'll introduce a 5-layer resilience framework, starting with layer 1, backup and recovery, the basis to everything. We'll work through configuration management, posture monitoring, and continuity orchestration. After that, we will highlight how Acsense brings these layers to life and delivers measurable business value. We'll then wrap up with the key next steps to turn this insight into action. Think of IAM as not just an IT tool, but as the access layer for the entire business. On average, enterprises depend on 200 plus applications through a single identity provider like Okta. When IAM goes down, it's not just the help desk that feels it. Operations, sales, finance, every part of the business comes to a halt. And here's where the shared responsibility model comes in. Okta is responsible for securing the platform itself, but you are responsible for everything inside your tenant, your configurations, your policies, and identity data. That's the layer where most outages and breaches actually occur, and it's exactly where IAM Resilience must be built. In terms of foundational terms and concepts, we're going to talk about evolving backup standards. So some of you may be familiar with the 3-2-1 rule, which we'll go through in a second. Backup by itself isn't new, but what makes it effective today is different. In the face of ransomware and credential-based attacks, the classic 3-2-1 rule has evolved. 3 copies, 2 types of media, 1 offsite, 1 immutable copy, 0 errors thanks to continuous verification and testing. Testable backups have become table stakes. After all, identity systems are now ransomware's #1 target, and nearly 38% of breaches involve credential compromise. So this is a repeating theme that we see year in, year out with the Verizon data breach investigations report. And some of you may be familiar with the concept of hackers no longer hack in, they log in. So this is where it comes from. When we say backup has evolved, we mean not just keeping copies, but ensuring recovery. It doesn't help to just have a backup if it's not recoverable. It must be tested, and you should be able to rely on it when the time comes. So with at least 1 immutable copy frequently tested and error-free, that's what modern resilience requires today. And here is our full resilience framework, which we're going to walk you through in a minute with Muli, starting with backup recovery, configuration management, posture intelligence, business continuity, disaster recovery, and last but not least, orchestration. And now I'll hand you over to Muli for the technical overview. Let me just bring him onto the stage in a minute.
Hi, everybody. My name is Muli, CEO and co-founder of Acsense. The background in IT disaster recovery at EMC and years of experience implementing Okta and IAM systems, I've seen firsthand that through identity resilience issues that Brendon discussed, we believe that resilience starts with the right architecture. Today, I'll show you how our design inherently delivers fast and reliable IAM recovery. And everything starts with a robust platform, which builds on layers. And each layer provides more and more confidence that you can actually recover. Because backup and recovery is not just about capturing data. It's actually about building the assurance that you can actually recover when you actually need it. So let's start with the basic feature that Acsense provide, and that's 10 minutes RPO. As you well know, in IAM environments, even small misconfiguration or credential changes can instantly disrupt a huge part of your organization. 10 minutes recovery point objective means you can recover your system back to any healthy state that is required, losing virtually no configuration data, keeping your organization operational and secure. After the data is captured, it needs to be maintained in a way that you can actually trust the copy that you hold. Captured data is maintained within Acsense in an immutable and air-gapped environment. And the reason is that attacks like ransomware often target the backup to ensure the victim stays locked out. By keeping backup data immutable and air-gapped, we that your data is available for recovery even if the attack was successful, and even if the attacker was an insider threat. Further is the actual recovery process. Recovery should be in a variety of cases in order to support multiple use cases. In Acsense, you get the most granular recovery possible. The reason is that mistakes often affect a specific user or a group or an application or a policy, and being able to roll back only this change can avoid disruption to the rest of the organization. But in some cases, a full rollback is required. For example, if you had a major disruption, a major deletion, a major attack, and you want to go back 3-4 hours ago. And maybe the last thing I can say about the first layer, the data layer, is that automated recovery testing is a crucial part of it. Because the worst time to find a broken backup is when you actually need it. And automated testing, which are built into the platform, ensures backups are verifiable and reliable, and no zero error assurance is an inherent part of our system. If there is no backup and recovery, none of the other layers on top of that is relevant. So we need to ensure that layer number one is everything when it comes to the resilience. Let's look at the architecture that Acsense implemented in order to provide what I discussed. So on the left side, you can see your production environment, which can be either an Okta tenant, Enter ID, or IAM system that you're using. And with a very modern way of capturing the data, we actually tap into the syslog of your environment and collecting the data every 10 minutes. The fact that this data is collected every 10 minutes allows us to process this data, break it down to pieces, and build it into our own database. In the middle, you can see Acsense Managed Solution, which is actually a database that holds every object in your identity and access management system, but not only the objects, but actually the relationship between the objects, and also holds every version and every change for this environment. What we build on top of this database is an actual time machine that allows you both to investigate by analyzing the data and looking for differences between any point in time, but also to actually recover to any point in time by implementing full automation to the recovery process. So undo in a click of a button is part of the system due to the fact that everything is available to the data that we hold. Next, Brendon. So let's talk about the higher layers, moving from backups, change control, and health and posture management. Let's start with configuration management, which is sometimes a difficult aspect to manage within IAM environment. Either an organization that have no capabilities of holding multiple environments may pass of having such a process, and some require maybe more robust technical skills like operating with automation environment and CI/CD programs. With Acsense, we provide a fully operational configuration management tool that allow you not only to create new changes into your Okta or Entra environments, but also to test them in an production-like environment on your sandbox. The other part of this layer is the posture intelligence. Since Acsense follows every change in the system, it can deliver continuous visibility into your environment, quickly identifying misconfiguration and validating the data integrity also. It's a proactive way to reduce identity risk and ensure you can recover with confidence in real time. Let's look at the architecture. What we see here, again, on the left side is your production environment that is synced into Acsense every 10 minutes. The environment in Acsense is searchable, and you can capture any point in time, including the current time or any other past time, and actually take a snapshot of this environment. Whether it is a full clone of your tenant or just a fraction, for example, let's say just your Salesforce environment, including all the groups and the users and the security policies, and just copy it into your preview environment. Usually we know that there is a large difference between preview environments and production environments, and with Acsense, we can close this gap immediately. Then you can perform your tests and build your environment within the preview. Once you're ready to deploy, Acsense will identify all the new changes and allow you to actually copy the code into Acsense without knowing any coding, purely with the UI, identifying all the required links into the real production environment and deploy it into production environment, regardless if it's a new object, if it's an object that require being updated, or to link to other related objects. For example, if you want to update Salesforce, probably you will need to update also some assignments to groups or maybe some group rules. And we capture everything and allow you to deploy it into production safely. Next. The last portion that we will speak today from system architecture is the layers 4 and 5, which are actually the more robust parts of the system and tries to allow you to reduce risk even for the most dangerous situation that you might encounter. What happens with your identity environment fails? Not because the cloud outage or the vendor outage, because a human error caused it to fail. A human error can be either a credential theft of a privileged account, which now can disrupt the entire environment, up to a full ransomware of the environment, being unable to access it. But similar cases can be also a script that ran over and deleted a large chunk of the environment. Rebuilding the environment due to some rate limits that the SaaS vendors have may take a long time. In this case, Acsense provide you ability to sync your production tenant into a hot standby tenant, which can reside in any other geography or region, allowing you to have minimal return time objective in case of disaster. Brendon, can you move to the next slide so I can explain the architecture of this solution? So, as you can see again on the left side, we have production tenants. In the middle, we have the managed solution of Acsense. The data within Acsense is constantly checked for errors. How do we do that? We actually embedded several identity providers into our system in order to constantly check and recreate clones of your environment on a new fresh environment. The reason is because we found that there are a lot of configuration that cannot be recovered and needs to be fixed in the source before they are recoverable. So what you as a customer gets is every couple of weeks, you get a report around the performance of the full test of recovery of your environment. This is an actual test which is done on an actual tenant. The test will allow you to see the errors that we encountered without being able to, for example, create objects for some reason, and the time it took us to do, and also the timestamp of the test itself to be used as a mean for auditors. Having a reliable environment in Acsense allowed us to provide a reliable disaster recovery environment. When the customer provide an additional production tenant, which we call it a standby tenant, onboard it to Acsense and activate the sync capability, which continuously replicate the data. Every time we see a change in your production, the change is updated within Acsense. Immediately, it's copied to your disaster recovery environment. The data is reliable. The disaster recovery environment is air-gapped from any action that might jeopardize it. For example, an attack on your production will require to have a second attack on your standby and will not be hopped in to that tenant. In case of a disaster, the system will redirect most of your applications according to your disaster recovery plan to work with the secondary tenant and will reactivate the users so they can onboard the secondary tenant. In that case, even if the access is lost for your production tenant due to a ransom or any other lockout, you can continue working with your critical systems on the secondary environment. Let's move to the next slide. What you can see here is the dashboard of Acsense. The dashboard is built in order to bring you the full visibility of your resilience, both the connection and connectivity to your production tenant on the left side, on the left upper box. On the middle, you can see the status and the integrity of the data that we have on your tenant, which in some cases needs to be improved on your production. And on the right side, you have the status of the communication to the standby tenant. On the bottom layer, you have the immediate events that we found in Okta that caused a posture change. Each event holds an undo button on the right side, and with one click, you can revert it. The script is automated. You do not need to understand what happened. You just need to click it, and it will happen. It will also allow you to see the new posture changes that might happen. Next. For large-scale disasters, you might use the tenant investigation tool. As you can see, you have a time machine on the upper layer. You can choose any point in time. Let's say you woke up Monday morning and everybody is calling you and there's an IT hell. You can just move to this board, move the slide up to Friday evening, which is the last time that you looked at the system, and you get a full diff list of every object in the system, including even workflows, realms, and any other object that you may have in your system. This quick change loop can be reverted in bulk within a click of a button. You can see on the right side the status of the changed objects, which you can identify and investigate further. Next. In case of a major disaster, for example, you had to fail over to a standby tenant, but yet a lot of malicious changes maintained and were copied to your standby tenant. Our rollback tool allows you to take the entire tenant to any point in time, for example, 2-3 hours before the attack, or a minute before the attack if you have evidence for that. And we will roll back every change that we found, including reconnecting all the objects back to their original related entities. Next. This is the disaster recovery screen, which is actually the mechanism to actually activate the failover from one tenant to another and performing several actions to automate this process, which reduces the burden from you as a customer in such cases. I will now give the torch back to Brendon to speak about the value proposition of the product.
Thanks, and I'll keep you on the stage. Let's talk about the impact in simple terms and Acsense's value that we're bringing. So protecting revenue, what do we mean by that? So when ransomware or other external threats stop identity services, every minute impacts revenue and customer trust. Acsense delivers automated recovery and hot standby failover with minute level RTO, which is return time objectives. That's what we refer to when we talk about RTO, return time objective, is the time it takes to recover. And we're bringing that down as close to 10 minutes intervals. And similarly for RPO, return point objective, we're keeping that data loss down to a minimum with, again, 10-minute intervals. In most cases, you will not lose anything at all. So you recover access quickly without paying ransoms. That's what we mean by protecting revenue. An example, fairly recent, which probably most of you are aware of, the MGM outage in 2023, I believe. That was 100 million tied directly to identity-driven disruptions. And what most people don't even realize is that was not the full cost involved. There was also recovery costs of around 10 million that was dished out to consultants. Faster IAM recovery directly limits top-line impact. And especially for regulated industries, this is of high importance. Coming to preventing business disruption. So this is more like internal and operational issues, like bad policy pushes, misconfigurations, credential abuse. All these things can grind operations equally to a halt. So instead of rebuilding from scratch with Acsense, we allow you to roll back just the affected changes. If you recall some of those demonstrations Muli was giving you on the platform, and this is keeping your employees and customers productive, again, with minimal downtime. And more than that, with Acsense, you have 10-minute return point objectives, keeping the data loss to a minimum. So you can roll back just before the incident took place, keeping the business operational with as minimal data loss as possible. And if we move on to compliance, so regulations like DORA, NIS2, APRA, which is the Australian regulation, and leading US frameworks such as NIST, CSF, HIPAA, GLBA, and SOX, these all require tested continuity with defined RTO and RPO targets. So you're going to become experts in RTO and RPO as you continue your journey with us. But either way, you can impress your managers by talking business language, and the auditors and these regulations require proof of these metrics. So it's really important to get familiar with them. And above and beyond that, Acsense's immutable air gap backups and recoverability tests also give you that audit-ready evidence and assurance to meet these standards. So the bottom line with Acsense, protect your revenue, prevent business disruption, and we're proving and helping you with compliance consistently and with as little effort as possible. So to recap, resilience requires architecture. It's not just a checkbox. Backup is a great start, but it's not the end. You need disaster recovery planning. You need posture validation and tooling to deliver true IAM continuity. If anybody's interested in our disaster recovery guide, feel free to use the QR code. You're also welcome to visit us and learn more on our website. Email us at contact@acsense.com or speak with your channel partners or equivalents, whoever invited you to this webinar. So thank you so much for joining. And I think we can answer some of your questions that came through during the session. I'll just bring on a few of our team. Let me just bring on Matt and Surab. If you guys would like to have a stab at these questions, I'll just give it a minute for you guys to get on stage.
What's going on? Good stuff.
So who wants the first question? You want to take it, Matt?
Sure.
How common is it for misconfigurations to cause major outages in IAM environments?
I've seen it a lot, actually, especially in large environments, because it's not just one person typically doing the change. You have a lot of other people in there, and sometimes they're not in sync. So one bad push can break authentication for like thousands of users. That's common before, where someone maybe doesn't understand what they're doing. Like you said, that's also one issue, but also someone doing it by mistake. So what's nice is that you can roll that back pretty fast, like limit the outage, because you can see who made the change specifically and roll it back. But without Acsense, you don't really see that at all. It's going to be there in the syslog. And if you don't have that documented on there correctly, you're not going to know exactly how that or where that change took place and what it impacted the group of users essentially. So I think it's
Okay.
more common than people think, though, for sure. It's like how they kind of always say, what was the saying, like 99% of computer issues are user error, or something like that. So that still goes here with identity as well, too.
Awesome. So Rob, question for you is how does a hot standby tenant recovery help in ransomware scenarios?
If your Okta tenant has been compromised, if you have been attacked by ransomware, so that means your overall functionality of Okta has been affected and you might have to shut down your Okta tenant. So in that case, you can rely on the standby because we have a continuous synchronization between the production and the standby. It is the exact replica of your production tenant, and you can follow the standard operating procedures and simply switch to standby, and your environment would be back to the healthy state in real good time. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate that. This user is asking, what do frameworks like DORA, NIST2, and NIST CSF actually require for IAM recovery?
So those frameworks actually define the way that organizations need to protect their environments. And out of these, the recommendations or the regulation is coming through is also all these kind of compliance requirements. In specific, the new regulation, the new requirement or recommendation that DORA and NIST issued in late February 2024 is that not only that you need to protect your systems against a breach or a cyber attack, but you need to be able to recover them in a timely manner. So the requirement is to have a recovery plan for your business and for your critical systems following a cyber attack. This is quite new. And you mentioned that in the past you've been asked, do you have a backup, but can you recover? So most organizations rely on the fact that the vendor in the SaaS declares that they have a DR and a backup environment. But the fact is that if there is a specific failure within their specific data within their tenant, not covered by the vendor. And this is where we saw the shared responsibility model coming up because the vendors were actually not liable for this situation. In this case, the customer need to take care of their own data and maintain golden copy of this data, which is separated from their environment in order to maintain ability to recover in case of any disaster rather than if it's just a deletion or a cyber attack or insider attack. So nobody can access this data except of the authorized people.
Awesome. And maybe I'll take the last one. This user asks, why isn't this level of recovery built into Okta or other IDPs? So basically, it's what we discussed earlier in the presentation, that IDPs operate under a shared responsibility model. So they secure the platform infrastructure, but you're responsible for tenant level data and configuration recovery. And it also comes back to these identity providers do not want to take on extra risk. So this is why they conveniently work with the shared responsibility model. So I think unless there's anything you guys would like to add, I think we've covered everything today, and I'll just go around if there's anything you guys want to add before we wrap up.
Yeah, I recommend the audience to look at the latest hype cycle of Gartner for data protection. They actually added a new section for IAM Resilience. They call it IAM Backup, where Acsense is also showcased as a sample vendor. Also, the external consultant understand that IAM is a different creature. It becomes such a critical component of the customer environment, probably also a single point of failure, which needs to have a specific solution for its resilience. Thank you very much, and hope to hear from you all again.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.